Hey guys, and welcome back to Joko Yo. I think this is episode number 13 of Johnston County history. And there's so many things that I've been hearing and seeing a lot lately about how some longtime residents didn't even know some of the stuff that's coming through this podcast, which is really, really cool. I plan to keep that actually going with this episode. Some people don't really know about our place, or Johnston County's place, in various aspects of United States history. And we're going to jump right into it today. You know, there's a lot that's been made about Smithfield and Johnston County and the American Civil War and how we have Civil War trails and how Sherman received news of Lee's surrender and Bentonville is here. But you know, I really wonder if maybe Johnston's revolutionary history, colonial history, is being a little bit shortchanged. Because really, I mean, I know that Johnston County and surrounding areas were pretty big in terms of the American Civil War, but you don't really hear so much about the colonial and revolutionary era, and it's just as important. So I'm going to throw out a couple of things for you. Now, whenever the American Revolution took place, we see a lot of changes, obviously, in North Carolina. And just like Thomas Jefferson said, people tend to take just so much. Mankind just is willing to take so much because changing for something different, altogether different, is scary. And in order for people to have revolutions, again, like in the Declaration of Independence, you don't do these things lightheartedly, having revolutions and civil wars. You got to really be committed to what you're talking about, because change, again, is pretty scary. But still, the revolution happened, and again, quite a few changes. And I'm not the least of which are some changes in names of some towns in North Carolina. For example, I don't know if you know, the town of Greensboro, the city of Greensboro, used to be called Guilford Courthouse. Then it was renamed for Nathaniel Greene, who was the American Revolutionary War general that swept through this area, had a big win at Guilford Courthouse. So there's a change there. You also have Greenville. Greenville used to be called Martinsboro, named for Governor Josiah Martin, who was a royal governor. It should be called Martinsboro. Well, that changed, and we got Greenville. We got Greene County. Fayetteville, for example, you may know already, was named for the Marquis de Lafayette. It used to be called Cross Creek and Campbellton, but called Fayetteville. And some people say that Fayetteville changed its name so that it could put itself forward as like the most American-leaning city in North Carolina at the time. I'm not going to get into conspiracy theories or anything like that, but it's out there. We also have the very first in North Carolina, the very first Washington. Any town called Washington in the entire United States was in North Carolina, Little Washington. And we also have, later on, we have the town of Jefferson and West Jefferson. You have Caswell County in North Carolina that's named for one of our first governors of a North Carolina state. Oh, what is also cool is the town of Kinston, the city of Kinston. It used to be called Kingston, which is how, I'm sorry, that would probably sound stupid. Kingston, named for, the king. Well, of course, anything that's related to the king after the revolution is going to be not really acceptable. So they dropped the G, and it's been called Kinston ever since. We didn't have that in Johnston County. We don't have any Jeffersons or Madisons or Monroes in Johnston County. We don't have that. So does that mean that Johnston was completely left out of the deal? Actually, the exact opposite. See, we don't really have any of those, but we don't really need one, honestly, because I'll throw you out some information that you may not know. Just because that's what this podcast is all about. So there was an actual meeting I'll give you the exact date, on August 12th, 1774, in Smithfield. At the Smithfield Courthouse, as a matter of fact, we see that there is a meeting of concerned citizens 2 years, by the way, before the Declaration of Independence. A full year, 1 year, before the Mecklenburg resolves, and that's important because it's one of the dates on North Carolina's flag. And another 2 years before the Halifax resolves, which is the other date on North Carolina's state flag. So 2 years or 1 year before the two events, the two dates on North Carolina's flag, something happens in Smithfield. You got a guy, well, several guys, as a matter of fact. There's some Johnston County landowners, including a man named Samuel Smith of Smithfield. He's the first cousin of Smithfield's founder, John Smith Jr. He assembled at the courthouse, or a whole bunch of them assembled at the courthouse. I mean, they were in full rebellion mode. They had it. They assembled at the courthouse. What were they having it against? Well, that's an object for another episode. They were, just simply put, they were really, really mad about some people that were getting by, well, as they saw it. Well, maybe I should just let Sam Smith say it. Sam Smith says that we are having a major problem in North Carolina. He said some of the biggest trouble that we have in North Carolina, and something that actually impacts him, that there is an absence of a trial by jury for anybody accused of treason against the crown. Now, y'all, treason is a big word. It's a heavy word. It means it's a big, heavy word. And for Sam Smith to say something like, we need a trial by jury for all people accused of treason, he must know of someone that has been accused of treason. And on top of that, is not getting a fair trial. Does he know someone like that? Actually, yeah, he kind of does. See, Sam Smith also is upset about another situation. And if you get the time period, in 1774, the Regulator War has just happened. The Regulator War divided Johnston County in ways that, if you go back and listen to the episode Regulators Unite, you had some people in Johnston County, right around the modern-day Wake County border, that were very upset with the Crown. But you also had some people in Smithfield on the Neuse River that were also upset with the Crown, but not enough to have a straight-up war. And so the Regulator conflict happened. And so Sam Smith actually knows some people that were members of the Regulators. And Sam Smith has this thought in his head that some of those Regulators being hunted down and captured and being put on trial for treason without a jury. Now, I don't know the names. I don't have those names, but I can pretty much imagine, given that it was so divisive in Johnston, it would be hard for him not to know someone. And a lot of people, since we're not just talking about Smithfield landholders, we're talking about Johnston County landholders, we do know of one named James Robertson, who's a Johnston County landholder who had to skedaddle out to Tennessee because he's being accused of treason. So Sam Smith is giving a speech in front of all these Johnston County landholders, and he says, we are having a trouble, and Johnston County, North Carolina, is being impacted more than a lot of other places in North Carolina, because it was here that the Regulator conflict completely divided us. That's one part. A second part that Sam Smith talks about all the way back in 1774, 2 years before the Declaration of Independence, he calls in his speech, as do all the landholders who apparently applaud him at the courthouse when he says it, that there should be never any taxation without representation. You ever heard that before? Matt, you probably have. It's one of the big rallying cries of the Revolution. We see that being said lots in 1776. Here it is, 1774. 2 years before the Declaration of Independence. And here we have in Johnston County on the courthouse a denunciation of taxation without representation. It's not. They don't really get upset about taxation. That's not the problem. And people like to misconstrue that, and they have for years. People then, during the Revolution, they were not upset about taxation. That wasn't the problem. If you want to have one government, and you want to have, if you want to have one government, one system, one people, then you got to have a way to pay for stuff. It wasn't taxation they were upset about. That's not at all what they were upset about. They were upset about taxation without being able to have a say-so about those taxes. So if you don't have a say-so about those taxes, or you're not able to give your 2 cents in a representative body, then you don't get to have a say-so. You don't get to have any kind of input. It's just being imposed upon you, no matter what the taxation is. People really like to harp on the taxation, but it was not the taxation that was the issue. It was the representation that was the issue, or the lack thereof, when the taxes were being passed down. That was their issue. So, were they being taxed without representation? Heck yeah. Heck yeah. And, we could go really broad and talk about the Crown and England taxing people here and imposing taxes on people all the way into Johnston County, North Carolina, and then conjuring up these images of people in red coats enforcing taxation. Y'all, that simply did not happen. The taxation they were concerned about was taxation from the governor of North Carolina, who was himself being told about taxation, mind you, from the Board of Trade in England. But it was the governor of North Carolina, the royal governor, who was imposing taxes and spreading it out through the courthouses. And so when they're not talking about something that they have no knowledge of, these guys have first-hand knowledge of the taxation without representation, because it's happening in their communities. They know the tax collectors. They know who the people in Smithfield are. They know who the people around Shotwell. They know who is doing the taxation, who's doing the collecting. They know. It's not broad. It's not vague. They know exactly who's doing the taxation. So what taxation are they concerned with without representation? Well, I should point this out too. See, the town of Smithfield was founded and was generally referred to by map makers as Johnston County Courthouse. And, perhaps a reason for Smithfield leaders such as Needham Bryan to support Governor William Tryon in the Regulated War in the earlier part of the decade was not because they were such loyalists, but because he was seen as the first able governor, in some time. Perhaps back to Gabriel Johnston, the county's namesake. And on top of that, these leaders that allowed Governor William Tryon to assemble the troops on their property, they were being paid for their help. Now, Governor Tryon was actually a pretty able-bodied governor. Again, more so than Gabriel Johnston, or was since Gabriel Johnston. Tryon knew how it worked. I mean, you can see that whenever he left North Carolina, he goes to New York, and he's a pretty able governor. He may not have been liked because he's royal governor, but he was an able governor. He kind of knew how the game was played, and it was about politics. It was about politics. It's about playing your cards that you have. Governor Tryon knew, it seems like, based on his own writings, Governor Tryon knew that there's just some things that you just don't do, that politics is not so much about enforcing rules. It's more about working with people to help you enforce rules. It's not about saying, these are the rules you will follow. It's about getting buy-in. That's politics. At least in its best form. And Governor Tryon understood that. And so, Governor Tryon, after the regulated war, he was done. He was done with North Carolina. He's a good politician. He got the palace, even though it caused people to get really upset about it. But he was done with this. And honestly, if you can look back at the records of the time, I completely understand. He was done with this. And so he got to go to New York. He was a politician. And the guy that followed him, that same aforesaid Josiah Martin, he's not a politician. I used to work with a person that someone I knew referred to this person as a lion kicker. Have you ever heard that? Hear that term? A lion kicker, if you're not familiar with it, a lion kicker is someone that sees someone that's in a corner who doesn't want to budge, doesn't really want to comply, doesn't really want to do what you tell them to do. And so instead of cajoling, not cajoling, that's a bad word, but instead of working with them, instead of trying to negotiate with them, you get angry and you start to kick him. He is a sleeping lion because instead of trying to say, hey man, can we work something out? Hey man, this is why we should do these things. You know, this guy that I worked with was a lion kicker. And when something comes down, to him, it was not about the people, it was about the rules. And the rules are the rules, and the rules are the rules. And so when people did not want to comply, instead of working with them, trying to forge some relationships, trying to get some friendships going, playing politics, he was going to enforce the rules. And people that don't want to really work with him, he gets very assertive about the rules. And of course, when that happens, then you have massive blowback. This was Josiah Martin. According to all of the records, Josiah Martin was a really good guy. He was a nice guy. But he was not a politician. And North Carolina was ridiculous at the time, which is why Tryon wanted to leave. Martin was not a politician. Martin was a lion kicker. Nice guy, but, he believes that the king's rules have to be enforced. And Tryon, for all of his politics, he did leave some problems. One problem was that the regulator war had been expensive to a very poor colony. It had divided peoples in neighborhoods and families, and psychologically did more damage than he probably even knew. Governor Tryon left that behind. Number two, the North Carolina-South Carolina boundary had still not been settled, which is one of the reasons why both North Carolina and South Carolina can claim Andrew Jackson, because that was disputed territory. And third, Governor Tryon left the problem that it had still not been settled at North Carolina which officials were selected by the people and which were chosen by the crown. And this is where we get into our issue. That's your taxation without representation. It had still not been settled in this state who gets to be in charge, who gets to choose our representatives. Do we choose our representatives through votes, or does the crown pick them? That was a taxation without representation that Samuel Smith was so upset about. And so, when named the governor, Josiah Martin had to face all this stuff. And he's a lion kicker. And Josiah Martin, as an appointee of the crown and a lion kicker, he decided that we had no business choosing our representatives. They need to be chosen by the crown, because that's who's in charge, the English government. And so when Sam Smith talks about taxation without representation, he knows exactly what he's talking about. It wasn't the taxation that was the trouble. It's that we did not get to choose who actually made the laws for us. It was being imposed. And if you know anything about Johnston County people, they do not like being told what to do, for the most part. And so there's a lot more Smithfield in the Revolution, but I'm pretty much maxing out my time today, and I will leave that for another episode because it gets even bigger than that. But I will leave you with this. It was in Smithfield in 1774 that we see taxation without representation being used as a call. I should also point out that at that same meeting, was a landowner named Dr. Calvin Jones. Ever heard of him? A few episodes back. Dr. Calvin Jones was one of those landowners that met with Sam Smith at the Smithville Courthouse. And Dr. Calvin Jones just happened, because he's from Massachusetts, he knows some people. One of those people was a man named Dr. Benjamin Rush of Philadelphia, a fellow doctor, from where he learned about some of his ideas of cataract surgery and also about inoculations. Benjamin Rush and Dr. Calvin Jones knew each other quite well. What's that got to do anything? Dr. Calvin Jones knowing Dr. Benjamin Rush? Well, just that Dr. Benjamin Rush was a really good friend of Thomas Jefferson. And I'll leave you at that. Y'all have a great day, and another episode's coming up soon. I'm going to follow along with this because, y'all, the only time that we actually see a hornet in Johnston, well, that's going to be the next episode. And along with that, too, is going to be one of the North Carolina's biggest Revolutionary War battles. Well, yeah, Johnston County has something to do with that, too. And so until next time, y'all, it's been fun. It's been great. Have had a blast. Y'all be good.